enchanting, rapturous, mystical, enamoring, these are some of the words that come to mind when one thinks about the Northeast. Lush green forests and mighty rivers contribute to the mystical aura of this land. Added to that, an intriguing and tumultuous past makes for a fascinating study. And any study of the region would surely be incomplete without an in-depth look at the state of Assam, or Kamrup, as it was known in ancient times. Assam's topography and rich natural resources ensured that the area enjoyed a checkered history. Geographically, Assam comprises the narrow valleys of the Brahmaputra and the Surva, which are situated between the Himalayas. Inhabiting this region are also the majestic one-horned rhino, and the Asian elephant. In fact, since ancient times, the elephant in Assam has been adopted for the state insignia. Hyun Tsang, the Chinese traveler who came to India around the 6th and 7th centuries AD, also mentions the presence of the elephant. The earliest form of agriculture that the state witnessed was chum cultivation. This method involved sowing of seeds after the clearing of forests. After using the land, it was kept fallow for a couple of years to ensure its fertility. This continued till about the end of the pre-Christian era, after which demographic reasons called for a new method. This was found in plough agriculture. Since this method required settling down near a source of water for irrigation purposes, it ultimately led to permanent settlements. This method led to an overall increase in the production of food grains. Which sowed the basis for barter and trade. The earliest influence of the Aryans in Assam can be traced back to the stories narrated in the Satpatha, Aitreya and Gopatha Brahmanas. However, the evidence here is not very concrete. It is rather vague. Further famous literary evidence is found in the Arthashastra written by Kautilya, the chief counsel of the Magad king Chandragupta Maurya. He talks of objects of high value such as sandal, aloe and incense found in Assam. This establishes that Assam had trade links with the Mauryan Empire. For all its mentions in Mauryan texts, interestingly enough, Assam was free of Magadhan imperialism due to its impregnable forests. This view is strengthened by the absence of Magadhan coinage or any ruins of Magadhan monuments in Assam. As far as the economic life of Assam in the pre-Christian era is concerned, we have very little evidence available. However, through the two epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, we can deduce that in about the 3rd century AD, different tribal chiefs of Western Assam came together to form a common tribal authority in order to protect agricultural production and surplus generation. This would also have generated the movement of essential commodities, but there were no intermediaries at this stage. This was soon to change. In the mid-4th century AD, the political configuration in Assam altered when the Gupta king, Samudragupta, forced the king of Assam to submit to his authority. This victory of Magad over Kamrup was both political as well as cultural. And it also widened the prospects of trade between Assam and the Gupta Empire, and Gupta coinage was introduced in Assam trade. In the post-Gupta period, wars between the rulers of Kamrup and other rulers, such as those of Madhya Desh, led to frequent unrest and the migration of people. The 7th century was a watershed in the history of Kamrup. As a result of the visit of the Assamese king Bhaskar Varman to places such as Prayag, Kanyakubj, etc., more and more people crossed over to the Gangetic plains in a bid to establish economic relations. Trade prospered and market linkages were being established, with the balance of trade being in favor of Assam.
Bhaskar Varman, who was a contemporary of Harshavardhan, there was close political relation between Kamrupa and North India. But so far as economic relations are concerned, we do not know much in details. But this much we guess, that since in Assam plenty of elephants were available, ivory was available, these things were, and timber, good timber was available, these were exploited and sent in trade to North India, and goods from North India also came. Because if political relation was there, if Harshavardhan could be helped by a Kamrup army which went all the way from Assam to up to Bihar or Kanyakubj, we assume that there was trade relation also.
Flourishing trade resulted in the introduction of metallic coinage in the 9th century, which enabled traders to increase imports. These coins were issued in the name of the rulers of the Micha dynasty, which had assumed power in the 7th century AD. Tezpur Harupeshwara became a famous trade center. The Tezpur inscription of Harjaravarman mentions cowries or buttikas as coins. The coinage system was very rudimentary, as we have no evidence of coins of other regions being found here. This is also a pointer to the continued existence of barter trade in the region. Trade resulted in the rise of the merchant class, both in rural and urban areas, who connected with each other through a network of intermediate traders. The articles of trade were forest products, textiles and minerals. Also, trade relations with neighboring countries such as Burma, Tibet and China carried on. It is obvious that such flourishing trade could continue only due to continuous, unhindered and connected trade routes between Assam and neighboring areas. Hyun Sang, the Chinese traveler, also mentions these routes. According to Tabakat in Asiri, there were 35 passes between Tibet and Kamrup. Apart from trade, agriculture formed the main economic activity of the region due to the easy availability of water. Both food crops and commercial crops were grown. Some of these, such as mustard, were even exported to Bengal. Most importantly, transplanted paddy or sali production became common in Assam. Copper inscriptions of the Assamese kings provide us with proof that a wide variety of fruits were grown here, which were also traded with the kingdom of Kannauj. Beetle vine and areca nut grown here are also mentioned in Ban's Harshcharita and the Apsad inscription.
Of archaeological remnants we find inscriptions and literature like Harshcharit or say Hiuen Tsang's travels, we can build up the picture. Main occupation was of course cultivation. Even today it is the main occupation. In the past it was much more occupation of the people.
Assam was also important for its forest wealth, such as precious metals and minerals. In fact, gold washing and making of refined ornaments became widespread, indicating stable centralized governance and regularization of trade and economic activities. In fact, the Tabaqat-e-Nasiri even mentions the installation of gold and silver images in temples. Artisans were well organized too, with metalwork, leatherwork, ivory work, woodwork, pottery, carpentry, brickmaking and embroidery being practiced. The people also specialized in the extraction of iron ore. The silk industry also flourished, and Assamese silk was a highly prized article of export. Since by this time land had become the main denominator of man's wealth, control over it was vested in the king's hand. Evidence suggests that the kings of Assam reserved the right to give land grants. For example, in the 6th century AD, King Bhutivarman gave land grants in the dried-up riverbeds so that people could be encouraged to cultivate the land. This would ultimately strengthen the economy through taxes levied on the peasants. This gave rise to a powerful and rich class called Vitteshas, who started performing the responsibility of pouring water over the king's head during his coronation. Along with the rule of the king in Assam, there coexisted the hold of tribal chiefs, whose relations with the king depended on the relative strengths of the rulers and the outcome of the various wars they fought.
For another hour.
One such major tribal group, the Nagas, played an important role in the history of the Northeast. They owe their origin to a wandering Mongolian community, probably Chinese in origin, that migrated in the pre-Christian era to their present-day abode. A scholar of Naga history, Vizier Miasi, traces their origin to a common village, Kezakinoma, and points out that many tribes such as Angamis, Chekesangs, Sena and Lothas have branched out from this original home. Angamis had a tradition of fierce independence and often clashed with the Kacharis, the forerunners of the Boros. But along with all this, there also existed intermarriages and learning of skills from each other. Thus, the Angamis and other tribal communities developed a rudimentary but effective form of democracy, with council headmen ruling on local disputes while discussing a problem. The Nagas clashed with the contemporary Ahom kingdom in Assam, which continued to exist until the early 19th century. They were later routed by invaders who unified much of present-day Assam and exacted tribute from the Naga hills and other small groups. Under the Mughals and the Nawab of Bengal too, the relations between the hill tribes of Nagaland and the Ahom kingdom were of extreme hostility. The hill societies were self-sufficient. However, barter trade was quite widespread. Trade benefited both the Ahoms and the tribes, but the predatory nature of some hill tribes was to the disadvantage of the Ahoms. The Ahom monarchs tried to combat this through the Posa system, under which the tribal chiefs were entitled to certain income from the plains in return for maintenance of law and order in their respective passes. It was at a later date that the Ahom monarch Pratap Singha formulated the Ahom policy of conciliation towards the Trans-Himalayan tribes like the Bhutanese, the Nagas and the Arunachalis. With the onslaught of imperialism in Asia and Africa, the colonial powers extended their arm of influence in India too. And in the northeast of India, their concern was related to the prospect of trade with Tibet, China and Burma, as well as diversification of trade with China. The leading imperialist nations of the time, namely France and Great Britain, both wanted a hold over the area, which ultimately was acquired by the British in 1826 after their victory over the King of Burma and the signing of the Treaty of Yandabo.
French had a factory also in Gwalpara, say in the 18th century, just at the time of Plassey battle around that time. And French connection started with Dupleix. He was like Clive, he was also a statesman who was an imperialist who wanted to increase the French sphere of influence. So he planned a trade mission to Assam. I wrote an article on it, Dupleix's mission to Assam.
The control of the English East India Company over Assam meant tremendous possibilities of surplus production and revenue generation through the discovery of tea and coal in 1823 and of petroleum in 1825. The company's bid to expand in the northeast for the purpose of tea plantations led to the displacement of tribes of adjoining areas. At the same time, not wanting to alienate the tribes, the company also started advancing traders into the region. Ultimately, the tribal chiefs lost political authority over the Bhutan Duars, which the British annexed in 1842.
Was a business company which was also ruling over a big area in India, and later on this was handed over to the King or Queen of Assam. So did the French company also elsewhere. But so far as Northeast India is concerned, French in competition did not succeed much. They were rather overshadowed by the English East India Company.
The systematic plunder of the Northeast had begun. The growing tea industry, minerals and timber led to the exploitation of the hill people by vested interests, including the Marwari traders, some hill tribes and the agents of European companies. Gradually, the entry of finished goods from Europe destroyed the trade in local produce such as salt, cloth, rubber, etc. The colonial rulers showed no initiative to improve technology or advance education, and this led to a further deterioration of this region. The plantation economy, patronized by the British, pursued a policy of large-scale labor immigration, since the rapid expansion in tea cultivation could not be matched with labor availability locally. Thus, in 1863, the Girmitia or agreement system was started, which regulated the transport of native laborers in Assam. But conditions such as unfavorable climate, lack of medical treatment, large-scale mortality caused by Kala Azar and desertions led to repeated labor crises. All this led to a retaliation which took concrete shape in the early 20th century when it grew into a working-class movement. It was aided by the activities of nationalists during the non-cooperation movement of 1920-21, and from the year 1927, the trade union movement grew by leaps and bounds. This ultimately brings us to the vital question of tribal identity, which lies behind the crucial ethnic unrest prevalent here since independence. As we have seen, prior to colonization, the hill tribes of the Northeast maintained a distinctive tribal culture, had trade relations with neighboring areas, a socio-economic setup, and a political structure which came to be gradually eroded. Major tribes such as Nagas, Mizos, Khasis, Garos, Karbis, and Dimasa Kacharis underwent a loss of regional identity and suffered economically as well. Therefore, since independence, the Northeast has been experiencing several tribal movements which have sometimes been peaceful, at other times violent. As a result of all this, Assam has undergone several reorganizations, leading to a severe reduction in its size.
The lack of successive governments in the center and in the states to meet the aspirations of various tribes in the region. There are 182 recognized communities in the Northeast, constitutionally recognized communities out of about 300 odd in India. Now, all of these small communities have their aspirations. They cannot be met in one go, obviously. The government has its own problems. So, all these factors put together gives rise to insurgency. First, it starts with an agitation. When the agitation doesn't succeed, it translates into violence.
The most glaring problems being faced by the tribes are those of land alienation, poverty, indebtedness, severe unemployment, cultural and political exclusion, and oppression. The tribals of Assam have played a historic role in formulating Assamia nationality and culture, and now desire to carry it forth as a symbol of their distinct identity. This they want to attempt through political mobilization. The issues raised by the tribal movements of the Northeast need to be addressed and resolved for lasting peace to prevail in the area. A holistic solution which looks into all aspects concerning tribal identity and existence, including regional, economic, and environmental aspects, is the need of the hour.
I would think Northeast is not lost forever. The cause is not lost. There are several strong points that the Northeast has. One, it has a lot of natural resources, hydel, mineral, tea is there. It's one of the biggest industries anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world. It employs about 10 lakh people directly and 40 lakh indirectly. The literacy levels are very high in the Northeast. So the language of communication amongst most communities and tribes is English. So that's the advantage that they start with. So down the years, say maybe 20 years from hence, I would think that insurgency would have I won't say vanished completely, because it cannot, as I said, aspirations of each tribes are still remaining. Until they are met, you cannot really, think that insurgency would go away. But I would think it will be at a very, very low ebb. People have already started to live with insurgency, treat it as a necessary nuisance, and carry on with their lives.
Such an approach, which embraces all these aspects, will ensure the wholehearted participation of the region in the process of national development. That the people belonging to this beautiful region may also rightly earn the status of partners in progress.